So today, I think today I would like to talk about something that happened yesterday. Now, I know I'm not a relationship coach at all, but my point is about clarification and like words matter and really responding, not reacting. So, boyfriend and I were talking about what were we talking about? Yes, mindset. So, he had said that he believes once you make the shift into the proper mindset, it was like you didn't have to work on it anymore. You had it. You had already gotten there type thing. And I kind of disagreed with that because I was like, well, no, you're always going to have to work on mindset because if you don't use it, you lose it. And it can be very easy to like fall off the wagon. Maybe life dog piles on you, and it can be easy if you're not having the awareness about to fall back into old patterns. Like this is just kind of a human nature thing. So I was like, well, no, you should always be working on it kind of forever. Like it's the thing you always have to grow with. So we kind of were discussing slash arguing, and I will say, like, yes, we could have just agreed to disagree and carry on, but we wouldn't have resolved the conversation. We wouldn't have got to the bottom of it. It's kind of like we would have just quit the conversation, so we stopped arguing type thing. Which to some degree, especially when when it comes to politics or sometimes when it gets to the point where you've resolved, like you're not going to change your mind, I'm not going to change my mind, then you can agree to disagree and carry on. But even again, at that point, you've gotten clarification to the point where you know 100% what the other person's talking about, vice versa, and you know that you are each on opposite sides, and that is fair enough. So you agree to disagree. In this case, it would have just been agreeing to disagree to not further discuss it, but we didn't have that proper clarity. So I would say we would have been quitting the conversation, and I that didn't really sit well with me. So um, long story short, I just simply asked him, okay, when you say working on, like what's your definition of working on in this regard for mindset? So for him, working on mindset means that initial learning about it, implementing it, practicing it, actually forming those habits. So in his mind, once you have those habits formed, you're not working on it anymore because you're not a beginner at it. You're just in the constant flow of it. So, having life come at you, checking in with yourself, having the awareness of like, oh, am I still doing this? Am I backsliding a little bit? None of that in his mind constitutes working on. Whereas in my mind, it does. So here we are actually talking about slash arguing for the same thing, and we actually agree, but because we have different definitions for the same words, we're not understanding that we're talking about the same thing. And this has happened to us a ton. Like this is like a really good example, that male versus female brain, and just like other people that just might think differently than you do, right? We all have different definitions for words. It's just how it is. For a lot of people, it may depend on like what region you're raised in, or if there's some sort of like ethnic background that influences definitions of words and stuff. Like there's all these things that can really define different jobs you've had that might impact your definition of different words, right? So it's really key to remember all these different, stories. It's like never assuming a story about someone about why they said something or did something, because you might be misinterpreting. It might be a wrong assumption. Similarly, we can't assume, oh, well, working on is simple. It means this. Well, it means that to me, but in this instance, it means something else to him. Get clarification. And then, yeah, once we had that, we're like, oh, okay, we're totally on the same page. I get it. Okay, that makes sense. And we're all good. And again, this is also in that moment where I was kind of getting frustrated because Obviously on a subconscious level, I understood that I wasn't really, he wasn't understanding what I was saying. And the human reaction to not being understood is to get frustrated, to get irritable, angry type thing. So there I was. And I will say I did have a small proud moment of recognizing, okay, I'm getting frustrated, so something is bothering me about this. Okay, we need to get clarification, like what is happening here. Again, so having that bit of awareness, take a minute, think about it, recognize what I'm doing, choosing to respond in that moment, ask him, okay, what's your definition? Let's clarify, as opposed to I could have just reacted and been like, oh my God, like, no, you're not getting it or whatever, or what, and then just like being like, okay, let's agree to disagree and let's just stop, which wouldn't have resolved the frustrated feeling I had, which I think was associated with not being understood, right? It wouldn't have resolved it. We would have just cut it off there and it would have just left me hanging, right? So, I had chosen to respond instead of reacted. I got clarification and really understood that, oh, yeah, especially having a past of us literally saying the exact same words and meaning two different things, or saying the same thing but saying it differently. It really, really has taught me from my past that, okay, wait a minute, I could just be having a misunderstanding moment because, again, there's going to be lots of walks of life of the same gender as you that do think differently, but this is classic male versus female brain. When we were replacing our floors in our old house, this became really, really apparent, where literally we would be talking about the exact same thing. And I would say something and my boyfriend would say the exact same thing back to me. And I'm like, I just said that. He's like, no, you didn't. You said this. And I'm like, yeah, that's the same thing. He's like, no, it's not. And so we would have these arguments. And then we really got to learn that there really is, we do speak different languages and we do have to have that awareness to not react to things, because odds are we're on the same page. We're just not communicating it properly. So yeah, and this is like, again, I am still working on my communication. I've come a really, really long way, but I still don't think I'm fantastic at it. Maybe I am and I'm not recognizing it, but I still think I have a long way to go. So I think it's just one of those things. It's always going to be a bit of a chore for me, something I really have to be aware of. And it just also shows how incredibly important it is. It really is the basis of everything, comes down to communication. It is so, so important. And again, I'm not saying like there's been oodles of times where I'm just like, you need to communicate this. And then for some reason, I still just don't. So it's, again, I'm still working on it. It is, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, we were raised to basically not talk about much of anything. Don't talk about your feelings. Don't talk about money. Don't talk about your work. Like, you basically just didn't really talk. You talked fluff about the weather, whatever, right? So having to pull all these skills out now, learn them, implement them, it is a little more difficult for sure. But I hope this example just goes to show you how incredibly important we could have had. I could have let that get to an actual argument. Old me being super overwhelmed, not having time for this stupid discussion. Old me would have just gotten upset, would have walked away and been angry probably for the rest of the day. And that would have been that. And I would have blamed him for my horrible day I had after, if I didn't snap out of it. Like, that's just what we do, not taking responsibility for ourselves. That's part of being in that overwhelm, is we're blaming other people. We're not, stepping up and really taking control of our lives. Yeah, just really some food for thought if you find yourself falling into these little traps. And again, it's nothing like to be like, oh, I can't believe you're in that trap, or like, oh, shame or judgy or anything like that. It's just, that is human nature. That's part of being stressed, overwhelmed. That's part of just being in that being raised to not communicate. Like, these are all skills we have to learn afterwards, because the majority of us were not raised with them. and really implementing these habits. And it is a struggle to get on that boat for sure. It's not, for most of us, it just doesn't come easily. So have that patience with yourself, have grace. Know, like me, there's going to be times where you're like, oh, I know I should communicate this or do this. And then you just don't for whatever reason. And just be like, okay, well, that wasn't my best choice. So let's just try and do better next time. That's all we can do. Maybe you can go to that person if it caused some sort of rift. Maybe you can go and apologize and be like, you know what, I should have said this. Sorry. I should have communicated that. I'll try better next time. Maybe that's something that might help the situation. If it's not one of those situations, then yeah, just understand you're still trying, you're doing your best, and then just try and do better next time. That's all we can do, right? So I hope this has been some great food for thought, because remember, I know this obviously encountered with my boyfriend, but this can be used if you have, whether it's other family, relatives, friends, employees, an employer. Miscommunications can happen anywhere and everywhere, right? That's just as simple as that is. So always remember to take that minute, choose to respond, don't react. Is there potentially a miscommunication? Are there, words here we could have different descriptions for, be thinking about differently, and really make sure you're understanding completely before you let any real emotions or whatever, fumble around and take over the situation, right? Like, and then again, there's nothing wrong with agreeing to disagree once you have that clarity. But like our situation yesterday, we could have agreed to disagree, but in reality, we weren't disagreeing. We were miscommunicating, and that's an unresolved conversation. That's not agreeing to disagree. That's just an unresolved conversation, right? So yeah, I hope this is clarifying for you. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the gist of what I wanted to say, because I think that's a really big one. And I think that's something, if you need to put the Post-it notes around, the little reminders everywhere, do I need to get clarification? Just have a little Post-it maybe. Do I need to clarify? Remind yourself. Take that breath. If you have like a water or a coffee, someone says something and instantly you're like triggered, you have an emotion, take a sip, give your mind a minute to overcome that emotion, calm down. Is that emotion justified? What is happening? Do I need to get clarification? And then choose a response, right?